The stars hung silent in the black ocean of space, each one a cold watcher to the dying light of a human ship drifting in the void. The vessel's name was the Horizon Dawn, once a proud colony ship carrying thousands of souls, now reduced to a broken shell of metal and fading hope. Inside, the emergency lights flickered weakly. The air was thin. The sound of alarms had long gone silent, and only the slow hum of the dying reactor remained, like the heartbeat of something refusing to die. Captain Lyra Hayes sat in the command chair, her eyes tired but sharp. Around her, the crew worked with shaking hands, trying to restart engines that no longer answered. They had sent distress signals again and again, hoping someone, anyone, would come. Each transmission carried the same desperate message: "This is the Horizon Dawn. We have suffered catastrophic damage. We request immediate assistance. Please respond." The message repeated endlessly into the dark. But no one answered. Lyra knew there were ships nearby, alien ships. The Zather Dominion controlled this region, a powerful alliance of old species that ruled the stars with arrogance and cold order. They had seen the human signal. They had chosen to ignore it. In the grand halls of the Zather High Council, the emergency beacon was displayed on a screen. Counselor Veth, a tall, silver-scaled alien, watched the human signal with mild amusement. "Another Deathworlder ship crying for help," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Let it die. Their kind brings chaos wherever they go." The others agreed without hesitation. To them, humans were dangerous, unpredictable, born from a world too harsh to produce anything but warriors. Helping them, they believed, was inviting trouble. And so the beacon was silenced, buried under layers of bureaucracy and indifference. Back aboard the Horizon Dawn, time stretched endlessly. Crew members moved slower now, weak from hunger and low oxygen. The ship's medic, Dr. Salim, checked on the children in the lower decks, giving water in small cups and whispering comfort he didn't believe himself. The youngest asked, "When will the rescue come?" He couldn't answer. He just smiled, even as tears burned his eyes. Lyra returned to the bridge and looked at the empty radar screen. No ships. No movement. Only silence. She opened the captain's log recorder, her voice quiet but steady. "Captain's log, final entry," she began. "Our SOS has gone unanswered. We have confirmed that the Zather Dominion received our message. They chose to ignore it. Perhaps they see us as too wild, too human. If this message ever reaches anyone, let them know we didn't give up. We only wanted a chance." She paused, her throat tight. "Remember who ignored us." Outside, the ship drifted closer to a dead moon, its engines lifeless. The stars looked peaceful, uncaring, and the cold slowly crept into every deck. One by one, the lights went out. The Horizon Dawn disappeared into the black, becoming just another piece of forgotten metal in space. On the Zather homeworld, the Council celebrated another successful day of peacekeeping. They spoke of order, of balance, of keeping the galaxy safe from the chaos of Deathworlders. Not one of them remembered the name of the ship they had left to die. But the galaxy remembers in strange ways. 100 years later, a small Terran explorer ship traveled through the same sector. It was quiet, old, but its scanners were powerful. When they detected a faint, ancient signal, the crew gathered around the console. The signal was weak and broken, repeating over and over through the static. "This is the Horizon Dawn. We request immediate assistance." The commander frowned. "This signal is centuries old. It's human." They boosted the transmission and decoded the metadata. The log attached to the signal played, and Captain Lyra's voice filled the cabin, soft, distant, ghostly. "Remember who ignored us." The room went silent. The commander stood tall, his face pale but his eyes burning. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "The Admiralty needs to hear this." As the small ship turned and vanished into hyperspace, the signal continued to drift through the void, carrying the last words of the forgotten. Somewhere far beyond, among the cold stars, something old began to awaken. On a distant world, deep inside the heart of the Terran Ascendancy, a new fleet waited. Thousands of ships, silent and dark, ready for war if needed. They were not the weak colonists of old. They were survivors, born from the hardest world in the galaxy. And now, they had a reason. In the endless dark, the ignored signal had found its way home. The stars had been silent for 100 years. Soon, they would hear humanity roar. End of Part 1, The Ignored Signal. The stars trembled as the Terran Ascendancy fleet emerged from hyperspace, a wall of steel and fire stretching across the void. Hundreds of warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls marked with the emblem of the Phoenix, a symbol of rebirth and vengeance. The fleet was silent, its engines burning blue as they advanced toward the edge of Zather space. At the center of it all stood the flagship TAS Vengeance, a colossal dreadnought that carried more firepower than entire civilizations once did. Inside the command deck, Admiral Jonathan Kane stood before a holographic display, his expression carved from iron. He had listened to Captain Lyra Hayes' final log more times than he could count. Every word echoed in his mind. Remember who ignored us. It was not just a message. It was a wound carried by every human who had ever been forgotten, dismissed, or underestimated. Kane turned to his officers, his voice calm and heavy with purpose. 100 years ago, our people called for help. They were ignored. We sent mercy. They answered with silence. Now, we send an answer of our own. The crew stood straight, their faces cold and ready. They had grown up hearing stories of the old colony ships, the lost explorers who vanished into the dark. Now, the ghosts of those ships had returned with a fleet of war. The Zather Dominion was vast, but old and arrogant. For centuries, no one had dared to challenge their rule. When their long-range scanners detected a massive human presence at the edge of their borders, they dismissed it as a mistake. The Council laughed, calling it a bluff, a show of power from an infant species. They didn't understand what the word Deathworlder truly meant. To be born on a death world like Earth was to fight for every breath, to evolve through pain, to adapt or die. Humanity had been shaped by storms, volcanoes, predators, and wars, and in the silence of space, they had learned patience. Kane's second-in-command, Commander Ellis, studied the tactical map. Sir, we've detected 3 Zather outposts along the outer rim. Minimal defense, mostly scanners and patrol ships. Kane nodded. Good. We strike the first one, take prisoners, and send a message. The Zather will learn that their age of dominance is over. The order went out. Within minutes, 3 Terran destroyers detached from the main fleet and glided silently toward the nearest outpost. The Zather station was peaceful, its crew half asleep. When they finally detected movement, it was too late. Blue fire tore through the darkness as plasma rounds ripped open the outer hull. The station's alarms screamed, but no help came. In less than 10 minutes, it was over. The humans disabled the remaining defenses and transmitted a single message: "We remember your silence." Then they vanished back into the void before the Zather fleet could even react. On Zather Prime, the capital world, panic began to spread. The Council gathered in their great marble hall, their scales and feathers shimmering under cold light. Counselor Veth, the same alien who once mocked the SOS signal a century ago, now sat trembling. "Who dares do this to us?" he demanded. The intelligence officers replied with shaky voices, "Humans. The Deathworlders have returned." The Council erupted in disbelief and anger. One elder sneered. "Impossible. Their colonies were scattered, their fleets weak. They cannot stand against us." But a younger officer whispered, "They already are." Back aboard the Vengeance, Kane listened to intercepted Zather transmissions. He could hear the fear, the confusion, the disbelief. It was satisfying, but not enough. "They think this is vengeance," Kane said quietly. "It's not. It's a reminder." Ellis frowned. "Sir, do you plan to negotiate?" Kane turned his gaze to the stars. "Negotiate? No. We will show them what it means when the ignored finally answer." As the fleet advanced deeper into alien space, the crew shared quiet conversations. They weren't fighting for conquest or resources. They were fighting for memory, for the thousands who had died believing someone would come. Humanity had grown, but it had never forgotten. Every ship in the fleet carried the names of lost colonies etched into its hull. The Vengeance bore the name Horizon Dawn along its side, glowing faintly like a scar. The Zather sent their first response fleet, 100 ships strong, heavily armed. The human fleet met them near the rings of a dead planet. The battle lasted less than an hour. Zather weapons were powerful, but predictable. Human ships moved like predators, fast and clever, using tactics no alien could anticipate. The space around the planet turned into a storm of debris and light. When the last Zather cruiser exploded, Admiral Kane gave a single command: recover survivors. Let them carry the story back home. The survivors were allowed to live, drifting in escape pods. Their reports would shake the entire Dominion. They would speak of ships that fought like living creatures, of humans who showed no fear, and of an admiral whose eyes carried the rage of a forgotten people. As the Terran fleet regrouped, Kane stood before the viewport, watching the burning wreckage fade into the darkness. "They ignored our SOS," he said softly. "Now they'll beg us to stop." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the fleet. Next target, Zather Prime's outer colonies." The stars around them glowed faintly red, as if warning of the storm to come. Humanity was no longer hiding. The Deathworlders had returned, and this time, they spoke in the only language the galaxy understood: power. Deep in his heart, Kane felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just war. It was history correcting itself. And the galaxy was about to remember the name of the Horizon Dawn. End of Part 2. The Return of the Deathworlders. The darkness of space was silent no longer. Flames lit the void where alien ships once floated in pride and arrogance. For the first time in centuries, the Zather Dominion tasted fear. News of the first Terran attack spread like wildfire through the galaxy. Humans had returned, stronger than ever, and they were not asking for peace. On Zather Prime, the High Council gathered again, their voices sharp with disbelief and anger. "They cannot be this powerful," shouted Councillor Veth, slamming his claws on the table. "They were nothing but savages a century ago." A young officer replied quietly, "Savages who learned." The silence that followed was colder than space itself. Far away, Admiral Jonathan Kane stood on the bridge of the TAS Vengeance, staring at the holographic map that displayed the entire Zather defense network. Around him, officers worked in complete focus, their movements precise, their faces expressionless. Humanity had waited too long for this moment. Kane raised his hand, his voice steady. "Operation Dawnfire begins now." The fleet moved like a storm, each ship taking its assigned position with perfect synchronization. Massive battleships spread across the enemy's border worlds, while stealth frigates disappeared into the black to cut off communications. The humans did not announce their attack. They didn't threaten or warn. They simply struck. The first target was the Zather fortress world of Vokrath, a planet protected by planetary shields and orbital cannons that had once been called impenetrable. But the humans didn't attack from above. Instead, they used an ancient tactic the aliens had never considered possible in modern warfare. They slipped beneath the shield, using hyperspace tunnels and gravity wells to drop ground troops directly onto the surface. The Zather garrisons woke to explosions in their cities before they even realized an invasion had begun. Commander Ellis led the assault force. She moved through the ruins of a burning city, her voice calm over the comms. Sector 4 secured. Minimal resistance remaining. Drones hovered overhead, scanning for survivors. Ellis paused beside a collapsed tower and looked up at the sky, where Terran ships glowed like blue comets. "They called us Deathworlders," she murmured. "Now they'll understand why." On the Zather command bridge orbiting the planet, chaos reigned. Officers shouted conflicting orders, trying to target the humans. But Terran ships moved unpredictably, almost alive, their AI systems anticipating every move. The alien commander screamed, "How can they be this fast? Their ships are smaller." But small didn't mean weak, it meant evolved. Each Terran ship was built for speed, precision, and adaptability. The Deathworlders had taken every lesson from their violent homeworld and turned it into design. Within minutes, the orbital defenses fell. On board the Vengeance, Kane received the victory report. He didn't smile. He simply said, "Broadcast the message." A transmission went out across Zather channels. It showed the destroyed fortress world, the burning sky, and Kane's face, cold, expressionless, and full of judgment. "We called for help," he said. "You chose silence. Now, we answer in kind. This is not war. This is justice." The message played across 100 alien systems, and panic followed in its wake. The Zather citizens fled their outer colonies, whispering in fear about the humans, the Deathworlders who had returned from the ashes of forgotten space. On Zather Prime, the Emperor himself watched the broadcast in silence. His attendants trembled as he rose from his throne. "Find out who leads them," he commanded. "This Kane. I want his head." His voice was calm but deadly. Behind him, the stars outside the palace windows glowed red from distant fires. The Emperor knew the truth. This was not a rebellion. This was retribution. Back on the Terran flagship, the crew gathered in the observation deck. The stars looked peaceful again, as if mocking the violence below. One young officer asked softly, "Admiral, will they surrender?" Kane didn't answer at first. He looked at the distant planets, his reflection cold in the glass. "The Zather don't know how to surrender," he finally said. "They only understand domination. So we'll teach them something new, respect." Across the human fleet, the soldiers spoke little. They had grown up hearing stories of the Horizon Dawn and its forgotten crew. Every battle they fought now felt personal, like avenging a ghost that had waited too long. They didn't see themselves as heroes or conquerors. They saw themselves as the voice of those who had been silenced. Meanwhile, deep within the Dominion, whispers began to rise. Some alien species under Zather control started to question their rulers. If humans could defy them, maybe others could too. Small rebellions sparked on border worlds, giving the Terrans silent allies they didn't even know existed. The galaxy was changing, and every blast of Terran plasma reshaped the balance of power. When the smoke cleared over Vokrath, Kane sent one final order before moving the fleet. "Leave their wounded alive. Let them speak." It was not mercy, it was strategy. The story of the Deathworlders would spread faster than any fleet could fly. Fear was the first weapon, and humanity had mastered it. As the Terran fleet moved to its next target, Kane stood alone on the bridge. He replayed Lyra Hayes' final message one more time. Her voice, tired but proud, filled the silence. "Remember who ignored us." He closed his eyes. "I remember," he whispered. The stars outside flickered like watchful eyes. Somewhere beyond them, the Zather Emperor prepared his counterstrike. A shadowed figure was summoned, a deadly assassin known only as Reth Voss. His mission was simple: find the human admiral and end him. But even as darkness gathered against humanity, one truth echoed across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had awakened, and their vengeance had only begun. End of Part 3. The First Strike. The stars stretched endlessly across the black sea of space, each one a silent witness to the chaos spreading through the galaxy. The name, Deathworlders, now echoed like thunder across every alien system. The Zather Dominion, once feared by all, had suffered defeat after defeat. Worlds burned. Fleets vanished. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Zather were afraid. But fear alone was not enough to stop them. Deep within the golden halls of the Zather capital, the Emperor stood before his war council. His silver robes shimmered under the cold blue light as he stared at a hollow image of Admiral Jonathan Kane. The human's expression was unreadable, his uniform black and simple, his eyes like frozen steel. "This man," the Emperor said quietly, "has humiliated our fleets, destroyed our outposts, and made a mockery of our rule. He must die." From the shadows stepped a tall figure cloaked in dark armor. His name was Reth Voss, the Emperor's most dangerous assassin. He was not a soldier but a ghost, trained to hunt, infiltrate, and kill without mercy. His reputation stretched across the stars. Entire governments had fallen from his silent blade. The Emperor's voice was cold. You will find him. You will end this Deathworlder war before it consumes us all. Reth bowed slightly, his eyes glowing faintly under the hood. It will be done, my Emperor. Without another word, he vanished into the dark. Days later, far across the stars, the TAS Vengeance cruised silently through the void. Admiral Kane stood by the observation deck, staring at the burning remains of another defeated Zather fleet. The Terran flagships drifted among the wreckage like predators circling a wounded beast. The war had been swift, efficient, almost mechanical. Humanity had become what the Zather feared most, a species that learned too quickly. Yet, as Kane looked at the distant fires, he felt no joy. Victory carried a weight heavier than loss. Commander Ellis joined him, holding a tablet of battle reports. The Zather have gone quiet, sir, she said softly. Their border fleets are retreating. Some colonies are even surrendering without a fight. Kane nodded slowly. That's not victory, Commander. That's the calm before something worse. He was right. Something worse was already coming. In a small cargo ship disguised as a neutral trader, Rethvos approached human space. His ship was old but equipped with stealth technology stolen from a dozen species. To human scanners, he appeared as nothing but drifting debris. His orders were simple: infiltrate the Terran fleet, locate Admiral Kane, and eliminate him. Yet as he entered human-controlled sectors, something unexpected happened. He began to see humanity up close, not as the monsters the Zather had described, but as something far more complex. He landed secretly on a human mining world to gather information. There he saw human workers laughing, helping each other, building things together in harmony. They were strong, but not cruel. They were fierce, but not heartless. Reth found himself standing among them, hidden by a simple disguise, watching the way they treated even their wounded and poor with respect. It unsettled him. These are not the savages I was told about, he whispered to himself. Meanwhile, aboard the Vengeance, Kane prepared for another strike. His fleet was scheduled to move toward the Zather industrial systems, the heart of their empire. But before the operation began, the Admiral decided to visit the planet Haven 9, a neutral world that served as a supply hub. Unknown to him, Rethvos was already there. Night fell on Haven 9. The lights of the trade city shimmered against the metallic skyline. Kane walked through the quiet corridors of the Terran outpost, his guards a few steps behind. He wanted a moment of peace, away from the endless reports of death and destruction. But peace never lasted long for Deathworlders. From the shadows, Reth moved silently, blending with the dark like smoke. His twin blades glimmered faintly in the dim light. He was close now, close enough to see the Admiral's face. One strike. One heartbeat. That was all it would take. But then something stopped him. A voice, a child's voice. Kane had paused beside a small refugee center, where displaced alien children were being cared for by human medics. One little Zather child, lost and frightened, reached for Kane's hand. The Admiral knelt down and smiled gently. "You're safe now," he said. "No one will hurt you here." The child nodded, tears in her eyes. Reth froze. His breathing slowed. The humans. They were protecting alien children. This wasn't war to them, it was justice, just as Kane's message had said. Something inside Reth shifted. For the first time in his life, he doubted his mission. He lowered his weapon. Later that night, Kane sat alone in his quarters, reading reports. He sensed a presence behind him. "You can come out," he said quietly. From the shadows, Reth stepped forward, his blades still sheathed. The two men faced each other in silence. Kane didn't reach for his gun. He simply watched the assassin with calm eyes. "You were sent to kill me," he said. Reth nodded once. "Yes. But I've seen your people. You are not what I was told." Kane stood slowly. "And what were you told?" That Deathworlders are monsters, Reth replied. But you fight like those who have lost everything. Kane's expression softened just slightly. We have, he said. But we learned something from that pain, never to let silence be the answer again. Reth stared at him for a long moment, then dropped his weapon on the floor. I won't kill you, Admiral. Not anymore. The assassin turned to leave, but Kane spoke again. Then help us, he said. Help us end this war before it destroys both our worlds. Reth paused at the door. You ask for the impossible. No, Kane said firmly. I ask for the truth. As Reth vanished into the shadows once more, the Admiral looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an assassin had just made a choice that could change the fate of the galaxy. End of Part 4. The Hunter and the Admiral. The galaxy had gone quiet again, but this time it was not peace, it was fear. The Zather Dominion licked its wounds while whispers spread of the Deathworlders' unstoppable advance. Entire sectors had surrendered without a fight. The once arrogant rulers of the stars were now hiding behind their planetary shields, praying that the humans would stop. But Admiral Jonathan Kane was not ready to stop. Not yet. The ghosts of the Horizon Dawn still haunted him every time he closed his eyes. The faces of those who had died in silence pushed him forward, reminding him of the promise he had made, to make the galaxy remember what had been ignored. In the war room aboard the TAS Vengeance, the officers gathered around a flickering hologram. Commander Ellis spoke first, her voice tense. Admiral, our scouts have recovered something near the remains of the Horizon Dawn. It's old, sir. Over a century, but intact. Kane's eyes narrowed. Bring it aboard. Within hours, a shuttle returned carrying a small, burnt-out data core, the last surviving memory of the lost colony ship. The technicians worked for hours, carefully restoring the corrupted files until finally, a voice crackled through the speakers. Captain Lyra Hayes, final log entry. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew that voice. Kane leaned forward, his hands trembling slightly. The recording continued, broken and full of static. We sent our SOS signal to the Dominion. They heard us. They chose silence. The room went still. Then came the part that froze every heart on the bridge. They jammed the signal. They didn't just ignore us. They made sure no one else could hear. The log ended abruptly, and the silence that followed was heavier than gravity itself. Ellis looked at the Admiral, her eyes wide. Sir, they didn't just leave us to die. They buried the truth. Kane turned away from the screen, his jaw tightening. All this time, we thought they were indifferent. But they were guilty. He stared at the holographic map of the galaxy. They murdered a colony with silence. A storm was forming behind his calm expression. The truth had changed everything. This was no longer about revenge, it was about justice for a deliberate act of cruelty. Kane clenched his fists. Prepare the fleet. We end this. Meanwhile, far from the human flagship, Reth Voss moved through the shadows of a dead Zather communication hub. He had returned to his people as a spy, not an assassin. Since his encounter with Kane, his loyalty had fractured. For the first time in his life, he questioned everything he had been taught. He had seen honor among humans, compassion in the face of power. And now, he had seen the Zather's lies firsthand. Deep within the Dominion archives, he discovered files that confirmed Lyra Hayes' message. The Dominion had indeed received the SOS. The Council had not only ignored it, they had classified it as a non-priority incident, and jammed the frequency so that other empires would never find out. Reth felt disgust rise within him. For centuries, the Zather had preached order, justice, and unity, but their empire was built on deception and fear. Using stolen access codes, Reth transmitted the classified data directly to the Terran fleet. When the files arrived, the bridge crew stared in disbelief. Dozens of official Zather documents filled the screens, orders, transmissions, signatures, all confirming the crime. There was no longer any doubt. Humanity had been betrayed. Kane watched the data scroll across the screen in silence. Finally he spoke, his voice low and steady. Send this to every world we've liberated. Let the galaxy see who they truly are. Within hours, the Dominion's greatest secret was exposed. Across the stars, the truth spread faster than light. Planets once loyal to Zather began to riot. Their subjects no longer feared them, they despised them. Even neutral species began to side with humanity, seeing them not as Deathworlders, but as victims of a great injustice. The galaxy had changed forever. Rethvos, now hunted by his own kind, sent one final message to Cain. I have done what I can. The truth is out. But the Emperor prepares something worse, a weapon of great power, hidden on Zather Prime. If you want to end this war, you must strike now. Cain read the message and stood silently for a moment before turning to his officers. Then that's where we go, he said. Set course for Zather Prime. The crew moved quickly, the atmosphere electric with purpose. For the first time since the war began, the fleet was not driven by anger, but by righteousness. They were not destroyers now, they were witnesses of justice. As the Terran fleet accelerated toward the Zather homeworld, the stars seemed to tremble. The Dominion's last defenses waited ahead, thousands of ships surrounding their capital like a wall of steel. But humanity had faced extinction before. They were born from a death world, forged by survival and defiance. They would not back down now. On the bridge, Cain placed his hand over the engraved nameplate beside his chair, Horizon Dawn. This is for you, he whispered. In the distant halls of the Zather Palace, the Emperor received reports of rebellion and betrayal. His advisors begged him to negotiate, but he refused. They think truth will save them, he hissed. Then we will show them what true power is. He turned to his engineers. Activate the Eclipse cannon. Back aboard the Vengeance, sensors suddenly flared with alarms. Ellis looked at the readings, her voice breaking. Sir, they've activated something massive. Power levels off the charts. It's coming from the Zather capital. Cain stared at the glowing data, his expression hardening. Then we face it. Whatever it is, we end it. The fleet entered battle formation. Hundreds of Terran warships turned their guns toward the heart of the Dominion. Every soldier, every captain, every pilot knew what was at stake. This wasn't just the final battle of a war. It was the moment humanity proved to the galaxy that silence had a price. The stars above Zather Prime burned red as the Terran Ascendancy fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm made of steel and fire. The planet below was the crown jewel of the Dominion, a world of golden towers and ancient arrogance. Now it was surrounded by thousands of alien warships, forming a living wall of metal around their Emperor's throne. The moment the Terran fleet appeared, every sensor in the system lit up. Sirens wailed across the Zather cities as citizens looked to the sky and saw the impossible. The Deathworlders had come. Admiral Jonathan Cain stood on the bridge of the TAS Vengeance, the holographic map before him glowing with the shifting chaos of battle. His fleet was outnumbered 2-1, but he showed no fear. All ships, he said calmly, initiate Operation Eclipse Fall. Target their command grid. Break the chain, not the blade. The order carried through the fleet like thunder. Hundreds of Terran warships moved in unison, their engines flaring blue as they dove into the fire. The first wave hit hard. Human destroyers cut through the outer ring of Zather defenses, firing coordinated salvos that ripped apart cruisers twice their size. Every hit was precise, every maneuver planned. Years of fighting and evolving on a death world had made humanity's instincts sharper than any algorithm. The Zather fleet responded with overwhelming force, their plasma cannons turning space into rivers of molten light. Ships burned on both sides, but the humans kept advancing. They fought with something the Zather had never understood: purpose. Each human soldier carried the memory of the Horizon Dawn in their hearts, a wound that had never healed. Commander Ellis shouted updates from the tactical station. Admiral, enemy reinforcements incoming from the northern orbit. 2 carrier groups and an armada of drones. Cain didn't flinch. Then we take their carriers first. Cut off the head, the drones die blind. He pointed to the tactical display. Bring the Valkyrie and Artemis squadrons to the front. Prepare the drop teams. Across the fleet, Terran Marines loaded into their assault pods, ready to storm the surface. The plan was simple but dangerous. Disable the planetary shield generator hidden beneath the capital city. Without that shield, the fleet could strike directly at the Emperor's fortress. As the battle raged above, small dark shapes descended through the atmosphere, human dropships burning through layers of defense fire. One by one, they pierced the shield barrier, disappearing into the stormy clouds below. Commander Ellis led the ground team herself, landing in the ruins outside the Zather capital. The sky above was chaos, filled with explosions that turned night into fire. Ellis and her team moved through the wreckage, fighting their way toward the massive energy spire that powered the shield. Alien soldiers flooded the streets, but humanity's precision and fury were unmatched. Every move was deliberate, every shot lethal. "We're closing in on the generator," Ellis reported, breathing hard. "We'll bring it down, Admiral. I promise." Back in orbit, Kane watched as the Zather fleet began to falter. The Dominion's admirals argued among themselves, their pride crumbling under the relentless human advance. A massive explosion lit up the darkness as one of the alien command ships went down. The humans had found their rhythm, swift, surgical, unstoppable. But Kane knew it wasn't over. The Emperor would not fall so easily. Deep beneath the Zather capital, Rethvos moved through the tunnels, his cloak shimmering as he avoided detection. He had returned to help the humans, his final act of redemption. His mission was to overload the shield's core from the inside. He could hear the distant rumble of explosions above, the sound of a war that could end everything. Reth reached the main control chamber, guarded by soldiers and engineers. He took a deep breath. "For the ones you ignored," he whispered, and stepped into the light. The fight was brief but brutal. When it was done, Reth stood bleeding beside the control console. He pulled a small detonator from his belt, pressed it against the core, and smiled faintly. "Kane, I hope this is enough." Then the chamber erupted in light. On the Vengeance, sensors flared. "Admiral, the shield. It's dropping." Ellis's voice broke through the static. "The shield is down." The entire bridge erupted in motion. Kane stood tall, his eyes locked on the glowing image of the Zather capital. "All batteries," he commanded. "Fire." The fleet unleashed its full fury. Beams of plasma and kinetic rounds rained down on the planet, striking the Emperor's fortress and the weapon silos around it. The surface burned under the relentless bombardment. The Zather defense network collapsed, their communication grids shattered. Yet even in destruction, the Dominion fought back. From the heart of the capital, a massive energy surge spiked through the atmosphere. Ellis shouted, "Sir, they're powering something huge." Kane turned to his science officer. "Report." The officer's face went pale. "It's the Eclipse cannon, Admiral. The same weapon Reth warned us about. It's charging, and it's aimed at Earth." For the first time, the bridge went silent. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, the home of billions, was now in the crosshairs of the galaxy's most powerful weapon. Kane's fists tightened around the railing. "How long until it fires?" 10 minutes, maybe less. Kane's voice turned cold as steel. "Then we end this now." He turned toward Ellis's channel. "Commander, the weapon must be destroyed at all costs. Reth's gone. It's up to you." Ellis didn't hesitate. "Understood, sir." On the surface, Ellis led her team through the ruins toward the weapon tower, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The sky was torn apart by fire, and the capital city was collapsing in flames. "We're running out of time," shouted one of her soldiers. "Then we make time," Ellis said, her eyes fixed ahead. She reached the base of the tower and saw the weapon glowing brighter than a star. It was already halfway charged. "We can't stop it," she realized, "but maybe we can overload it." She planted charges along the base, each one calibrated to trigger a chain reaction. In orbit, Kane watched the timer count down. "Ellis, status?" Static filled the line, then her voice came through, faint but calm. "Charges set, Admiral. Tell Earth. We didn't forget." The line went dead. A moment later, the surface exploded in white light. The shockwave tore through the clouds, ripping the weapon apart from within. On the bridge of the Vengeance, the crew stared at the display as the energy readings vanished. The Eclipse cannon was gone. Kane closed his eyes. "Mission complete," he said quietly. The siege of Zathor Prime was over, but the cost was heavy. The planet burned, its empire shattered. Humanity had won, but victory had never felt so hollow. The flames of Zathor Prime still burned, painting the sky with rivers of ash and smoke. The once proud capital of the Dominion had fallen into ruin. Its towers, once symbols of power, now stood broken like the bones of a dying god. The war was over, yet the silence that followed was not peace, it was something heavier. The Terran Ascendancy fleet hung in orbit, their ships scarred and battered, watching the dying world below. On the TAS Vengeance, Admiral Jonathan Kane stood before the viewport, his reflection merging with the fire-lit planet beneath. The cost of victory was written across every face aboard his ship. Commander Ellis's last words still echoed in his mind. "Tell Earth, we didn't forget." He had won the war, but it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like survival wrapped in sorrow. Humanity had proven its strength, but at what price? "Admiral," said Lieutenant Harris quietly from the communications console, "the Dominion's remaining fleets are surrendering across multiple sectors. Zathor leadership has collapsed completely." Kane nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on the burning planet. "And our casualties?" Harris hesitated before answering. 72 ships lost. 20,000 confirmed dead. Another 10,000 missing. Kane closed his eyes. The number wasn't just a statistic, it was a wound. "They'll be remembered," he said softly. A message blinked on the console. It was from the Terran Council on Earth. "Admiral Kane," the transmission began, "the war is officially over. You have our gratitude. The Dominion has fallen. You are ordered to return home for debriefing and commendation." Kane didn't answer right away. Home. The word felt distant now, almost alien. He turned to his officers. "Plot a course for Earth. But we'll make one stop first." The bridge crew exchanged glances, confused but obedient. "Destination, sir?" "Horizon's Grave," he said, "the sector where the Horizon Dawn had vanished decades ago." Days later, the fleet arrived in the quiet stretch of space that had started it all. The wreckage of the Horizon Dawn still floated there, a ghost among the stars. The massive hull was cracked open, its interior exposed to the vacuum of eternity. Kane ordered the ships to halt. For a long moment, no one spoke. "Transmit the names," he said. The Vengeance's comm systems came alive with the sound of 1,000 voices reading the names of the fallen colonists. Men, women, and children who had been ignored, forgotten, and finally avenged. As the last name was spoken, Kane gave a quiet command, "Honor lights." Across the fleet, thousands of drones ignited, drifting into space like tiny stars, each one carrying the light of remembrance. It was not a victory celebration. It was a funeral for a century of silence. When the ceremony ended, Kane finally turned toward Earth. The journey home was long, and every hour brought fresh reports from across the galaxy. With the Dominion destroyed, chaos had erupted. Power vacuums formed everywhere. Some planets declared independence, others sought alliance with humanity. The Council on Earth now faced a new challenge: how to lead a galaxy that was watching them closely. Were they saviors, or conquerors? As the Vengeance approached Sol System, the blue curve of Earth came into view. The sight stirred something deep in Kane's chest, a mix of pride, pain, and fatigue. He had fought for this world, but he wondered if it could ever understand what had been sacrificed. At the orbital dockyards, the fleet was greeted by a massive reception. The media called it the return of the Deathworlders. The Council hosted grand ceremonies, broadcast across every colony and station. Kane stood before the crowd, his uniform heavy with medals. He looked at the cheering faces but felt none of their joy. When the council speaker praised him for bringing justice to the stars, Kane simply replied, "Justice isn't found in war. It's found in truth, and truth is never clean." The words silenced the hall. That night, Kane stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the earth below. Commander Ellis's name was among the dead. Reth Voss's sacrifice had gone unrecorded by history, but Kane remembered them both. The official story would say humanity won because of courage and strength, but Kane knew better. They had won because of loss, because of pain, because silence had become unbearable. In the weeks that followed, the new order of the galaxy began to take shape. The Terran Ascendancy expanded its influence, offering protection and aid to the worlds once ruled by the Dominion. Some welcomed it. Others feared it. The Zatha remnants scattered into the outer rim, hunted and leaderless. But rumors began to spread, rumors that the Emperor had not died when the Eclipse cannon exploded. Some said he had escaped through secret tunnels beneath the capital. Others claimed he had uploaded his mind into the weapon's core moments before its destruction. Kane dismissed the rumors at first, but a part of him couldn't shake the unease. Monsters that survive defeat often return worse than before. One evening, as Kane prepared to submit his final report, a coded transmission arrived, encrypted with a Dominion signature. He almost deleted it, assuming it was debris from the war, but curiosity made him open it. The message was only one sentence long. The silence was only the beginning. Attached was a fragment of data, coordinates in a distant, unexplored region beyond the Orion Veil. Kane frowned. It wasn't possible. That region had been marked uninhabitable for centuries. He called in his science officer. "Can you verify this?" The officer scanned the data and looked uneasy. "It's authentic, sir. Dominion encryption, but the signal isn't from their old networks. It's coming from something new." Kane stared at the coordinates on the screen, the same dread he'd felt years ago when the first SOS went unanswered creeping back into his chest. Could the Dominion have survived? Or was this something else, something older, darker, waiting beyond the edge of known space? He knew one thing for certain: peace would not last. The galaxy was wounded, and wounds often fester before they heal. He turned off the lights in his quarters and looked out into the infinite black, whispering to himself, "If they call again, we'll be ready this time." The silence of victory hung heavy around him, but in that silence, something new was stirring, something that watched, waited, and listened. Humanity had ended one nightmare, but in the shadows of the stars, another was awakening. Months had passed since the fall of the Dominion, and the galaxy had begun to rebuild. Worlds once ruled by fear were now learning to breathe again. Trade routes reopened, alliances were formed, and for the first time in centuries, there was hope among the stars. But Admiral Jonathan Kane knew that peace in the galaxy was fragile. Too quiet, too easy. He had seen the message, the one that whispered through Dominion code. The silence was only the beginning. It haunted him more than any battle scar. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And promises like that didn't fade. They waited. On board the TAS Vengeance, now refitted and reclassified as a deep space exploration vessel, Kane sat in the command chair as the ship drifted beyond known space. The crew was smaller now, mostly volunteers, veterans who refused to rest until they understood what lay beyond the Orion Veil. Commander Lien Torres, his new second-in-command, stood beside him. "Admiral," she said quietly, "we've reached the coordinates from the transmission. But there's nothing here. No planet, no station, not even debris." Kane leaned forward. "Scan again. There's always something." The scanners pulsed, their light waves cutting through the void. Then suddenly, a flicker appeared, a distortion in space, like a ripple across black water. "There," Kane said, eyes narrowing. "That's no natural anomaly." The distortion expanded slowly, revealing something massive and ancient, an artificial structure floating just beyond the reach of light. It was not Zatha design, nor human. Its architecture was alien even by galactic standards, curved metallic veins pulsing with faint energy, forming a ring that seemed to twist reality itself. The crew stared in silence. "What is it?" Torres whispered. The science officer swallowed hard. It's not a station, sir. It's a gate. Kane frowned. A gate to where? Unknown. But the energy signature, it's similar to the Eclipse cannon's power readings. Maybe connected. The mention of the weapon made everyone tense. Kane stood slowly. Prepare a probe. The small drone shot forward into the gate's center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the drone vanished. Not destroyed, just gone. Its signal cut instantly, as if swallowed by the dark. A low hum began to fill the air, the ship's systems flickering. Admiral, the structure's reacting to us. Torres shouted. It's generating a gravitational pull. Kane gritted his teeth. Engines, full reverse. The ship strained against the invisible force, metal groaning, alarms screaming. But before they could break free, a surge of energy burst from the gate, enveloping the Vengeance in blinding light. When the light faded, everything was silent again. The stars outside were gone. The scanners showed nothing, no known constellations, no nearby systems. Just a dead, empty expanse. Where are we? Torres whispered. The science officer's face was pale. I don't know, sir. The stars don't match any chart. We're not in our galaxy anymore. The bridge went still. The Vengeance had crossed the gate and entered somewhere else, somewhere beyond the known universe. Hours passed as the crew tried to restore systems and analyze their surroundings. Then, faintly, a signal appeared, weak but structured. It was a voice, distorted and ancient. Kane listened closely, his pulse quickening. The voice wasn't Zather. It wasn't human. It spoke in broken phrases that the translator struggled to decode. You have awoken. The chain. You should not have come. The voice faded, replaced by static. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Is it a warning? Torres asked. Kane nodded slowly. Or a threat? Moments later, the ship's sensors detected movement. Massive objects approaching from all directions. They weren't ships in any familiar sense. They looked like living shadows made of metal and light, drifting with purpose. As they drew closer, their forms shifted, like smoke trying to remember a shape. One of them emitted a sound, deep, resonant, and ancient, shaking the ship's hull. Weapons online. Torres shouted. Kane held up a hand. Wait. The creatures surrounded them but didn't attack. One moved closer to the viewport, its shape forming a rough humanoid silhouette. Then, from within the static, a voice echoed again. The cycle begins anew. The silence was broken, and now the echo returns. Kane felt a chill run down his spine. Identify yourself, he demanded. The entity tilted its head, as if studying him. We are the ones before the first signal. We were the architects of the gates. The Zather found what they could not understand. They woke the dark between stars. Kane's eyes widened. You mean the Eclipse cannon? It was built from your technology. Incomplete, the entity replied. Imperfect. The weapon was a fragment. The true core still sleeps. You have stepped into its dream. The bridge lights flickered, and suddenly every console displayed the same symbol, a spiral of light descending into darkness. Admiral, said the science officer, panic rising in his voice, something's linking with our systems. Shut it down, Kane ordered. But it was too late. The entity's voice deepened, vibrating through their minds. The cycle of silence ends. The war was never yours to fight, it was the test. In that instant, Kane understood. The SOS from the Horizon Dawn, the Dominion's interference, even the war. It had all been part of something larger, a chain of events set in motion long before humanity reached the stars. The entities were ancient watchers, using civilizations like chess pieces to measure their evolution. Humanity's war had simply been the latest move in a cosmic game. But Kane had never been one to accept fate. If this is a test, he said coldly, then here's my answer. He activated the Vengeance's main weapon systems, locking onto the nearest entity. The ship fired a concentrated pulse of plasma energy. The blast struck the creature, tearing through its shimmering form. The others reacted instantly, the void erupting in chaos. The battle that followed was like nothing the crew had ever seen, light and shadow colliding in silence, time itself distorting. The Vengeance took heavy damage, but Kane refused to retreat. "We came this far," he shouted. "We end this." With the ship's engines failing, Kane directed all remaining power to the core. "If they want silence, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The crew watched as the core began to overload, light filling the bridge. Torres met his gaze. "It's been an honor, sir." Kane nodded. "See you on the other side." The explosion tore through the void, a flash of defiance that shattered the gate's structure. The entities vanished into the dark as the shockwave consumed everything. Far away, in the Milky Way, astronomers detected a faint pulse, a single echo that rippled across the stars. It carried no words, only a signal, repeating endlessly. Some called it a ghost transmission. Others said it was a warning. But those who understood whispered a different truth. The Deathworlders had gone beyond the veil, and even in the unknown, they had made the galaxy listen.